Hello, everybody. Today we are joined by four experts in the field of animal cognition, and I've invited them here to share their knowledge on the various aspects of said topic. Today we are joined by Roxanne, Alex, Ryan, and Olivia, who will, over the course of this program, participate in the explanation of four different aspects of animal cognition. The four areas that will be of focus today will be mind body, ethics, thought, and consciousness. The first topic that will be discussed will be the mind body by Roxanne.
Yes, okay. So starting with the traditional mind-body problem revolves around the understanding of the relationship between mental properties like consciousness and thoughts and physical properties such as the brain and the body. A way to explore this problem is by examining non-human animals. Hilary Putnam, for example, in 1967 famously used the example of octopus paint to challenge identity theory, which posits a direct link between mental and physical states. Putnam's example introduced the concept of multiple realizability, suggesting that different physical systems can give rise to the same mental states.
Thank you. Mind body problem has been one that philosophers have been trying to solve for some time. Roxanne, so what do contemporary philosophers think about non human animals regarding the mind body problem?
Contemporary philosophers have further explored the relationship between the mind and body by examining octopus behavior and physiology. They argue for concepts like embodied cognition, emphasizing the role of the body in thought. However, other contemporary philosophers also propose the existence of multiple cognitive systems working together within a single organism.
Well, embodied cognition is a confusing concept you brought up. How do the concepts of embodied cognition and the existence of multiple cognitive systems within an organism impact our understanding of the mind body relationship?
Both embodied cognition and the existence of multiple cognitive systems challenge the reductionist view that the mind can be entirely explained by the physical properties of the brain. Even in non-neuronal organisms like sponges and slime molds, we see evidence of cognitive processes that are integrated with the physical body and are responsive to environmental stimuli. Embodied cognition and the existence of multiple cognitive systems emphasize the interconnectedness of the mind and body. The importance of the environment and the diversity of cognitive processes. Cognition is not solely a function of neural structures, but can emerge from the interactions between an organism's body and the environment. These concepts broaden our understanding of the mind body relationship, suggesting a more complex and dynamic interplay between mental and physical aspects of cognition and consciousness.
In light of that answer, in this section, we will take a question from a caller for you, the audience, to answer. How do studies of non neuronal organisms like sponges and slime molds contribute to the discussion of the mind body problem? The consciousness problem is explored not only by philosophers but by scientists, both experts of their field. The studies rely heavily on neurological and physical traits of animals. Olivia, why don't you tell us a little bit about the discourse around animal consciousness?
Yeah, so consciousness is argued heavily among both scientists and philosophers alike, both of which rely strongly on the other for theories and discussion on the topic. Studies are sensitive to those of neurobiological and physiological properties of animals, including pain, emotions, decision making, learning, and memory. Perspectives in philosophy on consciousness surrounding non-human animals have varied from skepticism as to the ability of most animals to empathetic theories as to their cognitive complexity. When considering the consciousness of non-human animals, it's important we consider our own. We have no quantifiable proof of our own consciousness existing, yet for the basis of theories and argument, we can justifiably assume that we as humans are conscious. If we assume the markers for consciousness are the ability to process and react to pain, then under that classification, nearly every animal is conscious with few exceptions. It's impossible to dismiss the argument that non-human animals are conscious. We ourselves assume we are conscious and know we feel pain. Therefore, it's logical to assume that non-human animals are as well, as they have been proven to feel and evaluate their pain. They can be considered no less conscious than humans.
Well, how can you assume animals are conscious based on the fact they can feel pain?
Yeah, so when you take into consideration the fact that many animals hibernate for the winter, consciously preparing to sleep for months and storing masses of food and finding sufficient shelter to avoid the winter climate, if they if animals weren't conscious beings, you could logically assume that they wouldn't understand the threat of winter and they'd be dying of starvation or freezing to death. So, without the ability to process clear signs of danger or potential harm, life is short and animals don't tend to run headfirst towards danger.
Well, what would a marker for consciousness be in an animal? If humans have no basis for our own consciousness, how can you identify it in animals?
You can find markers of consciousness in animals by understanding human phenomenological experiences. So, pain, memories, decision making, and learning are all markers we acknowledge in what we consider human consciousness to look like. So, animals are known to feel pain, remember significant details, count, and problem solve. I would guarantee your dog is in your hometown currently, sad that you're not there, remembering when you were home for the summer. And I'm sure you would consider a human conscious if they did the exact same thing.
Thank you. And for our audience question for this segment, how do animals like the naked mole rat, which have been found to be impervious to most pain, contribute to the discussion of consciousness in animals? And for our next segment, Ryan will be talking about the problem of thought. Animal cognition deals closely with whether animals have the capacity for thought and the nature surrounding that thought. What is the general consensus about animals having thoughts?
Yeah, thanks, Garrett. Historically, many philosophers believe that thoughts are closely linked to having language. And since animals don't have language, there is no reason to believe they can think. Think of a dog chasing a cat, for example. The cat starts running and the dog's chasing it. The cat goes up an oak tree, but quickly at the last second it goes into a maple tree instead. The dog still thinks that the cat is in the oak tree. Now, we have no ability here to really accurately describe the dog's belief. We could say something like, does the dog think the cat went up the oldest tree, or the tree that smells the best? But even attempts to do this infer some sort of human understanding, because the dog does not know exactly what a tree is, nor does it know exactly what a cat is. The problem is that similar issues arise even when determining other humans' beliefs. How can we accurately describe another human's thoughts when we don't know exactly what they mean by tree or dog or more complex representations? It's possible that the dog thinks of the cat in terms of representational actions, like it's a chaseable or eatable thing. But these representations can be formed into a compositional representational system, which can be formed into its own language via these representations. Jerry Fodor first theorized this as the language of thought. It makes it possible that the thoughts themselves form the language instead of the language forming the thoughts.
Thank you. Animals having thoughts makes for some interesting implications. For example, can their thoughts evolve?
Right. So, if animals think in representational systems, I'm going to opt into saying that their thoughts can't evolve. We can all imagine the dog that presses the buttons that make the sounds to communicate to its owner in a language that the owner understands. The dog can say, like, press a button that says hungry when it's hungry, or press a button that says squirrel when there's a squirrel outside and it wants to go outside. Surely, if it was possible for animal thoughts to evolve, it would begin to make new sentences based on these representations. For example, it could press the button hungry squirrel to denote that it's hungry for a squirrel. But we just don't really see this happening, so we don't really know whether their thoughts can evolve, but it's unlikely as of right now.
Thanks, Ryan. Once again, we will have another audience question. If animals have thoughts, do they have the capability to make choices? How do they make those choices? And for our next session, we will be doing ethics. Regarding this field of study, there are two main areas of ethics that we consider: the question of moral status and moral treatment. Alex, so there's been discourse on whether animals should be granted moral status and whether they should receive moral treatment. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so in relation to animal cognition, there's been increased discourse regarding the ethical considerations that should accompany the presence of awareness. And ethical theorizing in regards to animals involves the question of moral status and moral treatment. So, when discussing moral status, the goal is to determine which animals are owed moral consideration and on what grounds. So, once that is established, then the consideration of moral treatment begins, and we can begin to theorize about the interests of these animals and how those interests may conflict with our own. So, the simplest and most common capacity used to justify and defend animals' moral status is their sentience, which is the ability to feel pain and happiness. So, saying that animals are sentient begins to admit that they care about their lives and experiences, and they desire to live happily and freely. And establishing that animals are sentient means that we have to consider what kind of treatment animals are owed, and we have to begin to consider and care about what happens to them.
But how would you know that animals care about what happens to them? Is sentience enough?
Yeah, well, ascribing sentience means that they experience the world and have the desire to avoid pain and enjoy happiness and pleasure. So, this means that they have interests about the occurrences of their lives. And scholars in comparative cognition research have even argued that animals also enjoy pleasures such as freedom, friendships, and even relationships. So, they can also experience emotions, like if you think about your dog, how they react when you leave for the day versus how they react when you return from work or something.
So, does stating that animals have sentience mean that we have to reconsider the ways in which we treat or view them?
Yeah, so it does influence the discourse on moral treatment of animals and the treatment that they're owed. So, this argument means that they are wronged when they're subjected to pain or exploitation and when they're denied freedom and happiness. So, due to the large scale relationship that we have with animals, this would mean that we would have to rethink how we treat animals.
Should animals be considered within the realm of personhood if they display sentience and consciousness? Considering that personhood is ascribed to being who are entitled the legal protection based on their possession of certain characteristics, such as rationality, self awareness, or sociality. Okay, thank you. Well, okay, guys, thank you all for joining us and sharing your expertise. We've unfortunately run out of time, but we'll be back after the commercial break with a new set of guests that will tell us why they think that monkeys should be eligible for a driver's license.